We're live in 3, 2...
Welcome into Leatherbrains, your host here, Slapdawg, and you are in the right place where championships are more than just a fantasy. Ooh. I am not alone on this wonderful episode 152 here today. I am joined by both Alan Casanova Castro and Scotty Del Rey. Gentlemen, how was your weekends?
It was solid. I did a whole lot. By that, I didn't do much, actually. Okay.
Oh, I was gonna say, I was excited. I was gonna see what you got done, but
nope. I had a great weekend of doing not a lot, which is the best weekend.
Went to the Furniture Mart and bought a new vacuum yesterday.
Ooh.
So
adulting. Congratulations.
New vacuum day?
I got that going for me. Oddly enough, we didn't realize how shitty our old vacuum was until we got a new one. Then I was like, dear God, my poor kids.
This house is a disaster. You're vacuuming the ceilings and shit.
Terrible. Yep, just adulting.
Well, congratulations on the new vacuum. And it's good to have you boys here. We have a lot to talk about, of course, like we do every episode. So today we're going to be talking about all of the week 13 recaps, excuse me. And then also a little bit of fantasy football sprinkled in there. We got waiver wires. We're going to answer your questions at the end of the episode. We have a lot to unpack to include studs and duds, MVP, all that good stuff. And let's just get into it, gentlemen. Let's kick it off with the MVP of the week.
Yeah, the Leatherbrains MVP of the week, which of course is brought to you by Prime Society, luxury leather bags, backpacks, and accessories. So if you haven't already, make sure you join elite athletes like Tyreek Hill and Klay Thompson by checking out primesociety.com and shopping their luxury bags, luggage, and accessories. Whether you're looking for the perfect high-quality Christmas gift that won't break the bank, or you want to turn heads with the swagger of a pro athlete, Prime Society is your answer. Your fantasy MVP helped you secure the bag in your league, so make sure you secure the bag with Prime Society. Use promo code LBZ20 to get 20% off your order today at primesociety.com. Again, LBZ20 to get 20% off today. And now, the Leatherbrains MVP of the week is none other than DK Metcalf. 6 for 8, 134 yards, 3 touchdowns, 37.4 PPR points.
Do you need to take a drink? Because I thought you were about to choke on your own spit there. I'm glad you didn't.
I always do that every time.
I'm glad that you didn't, but I've
got a shortage of spit up in this body.
Well, that's why you got the water.
That's right.
This makes me sad, to be honest with you, because I traded DK Metcalf a few weeks ago for what is now a stupid trade, and I shot myself in the foot quite a bit. I traded him straight up for Dameon Pierce, like early in the season, because I was like, I need a running back. So to see this, it definitely hurt, but I mean, it's DK Metcalf. The guy is a scary human being. I'm not surprised that he did this, but I kind of am surprised that he did this just because there's so many weapons on the Seattle offense. So nonetheless, great to see. Congratulations to anybody that started DK Metcalf this week, and I apologize if you went against him. I don't know if either of you gentlemen did. Thankfully, I did not, so I was in the clear.
I just immediately thought of the other Matthew in our group. And I was like, oh, crap. Because he was asking us. He was like, well, I got to make this trade. I'm in a must win. Because who did he want to trade for DK?
T. Higgins. In a dynasty, he wanted to train T. Higgins for DK straight up. And we were like, I mean,
from a dynasty outlook, I think we were right. But in the immediacy of him needing a win and then DK becoming the MVP makes me think that we have some power here. But for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it definitely... It didn't feel good because this happened like the day, like right before DK Metcalf had his spectacular game. He came into our group chat and was like, hey, I need some advice here. I know you guys know ball. He knows ball. But, you know, even though we all know ball, we still want to run it off each other and just have some good conversation and express all thoughts. And we did. And it was pretty mutual. Like, hey, don't trade T. Higgins away. Don't get DK Metcalf. It's not worth it. Your dynasty output is much better with T. Higgins, and then this happened, and it was rather sad for the rest. Like, I did feel bad because we were all like, "Don't do it," and he's like, "Okay, I'm not going to do it."
So bad. Because he's like, "I need to win so bad," and then watching him on Thursday night is the worst night to have your like miss from a start and sit because you have 3 extra days to sit there and stew on the fact that you have to like give the rest of your team a pep talk to be like, all right, I fucked up on Thursday. You guys need to pick up the slack on Sunday because this is bullshit.
Yeah, that's are any of you guys in the camp that benched Geno because I benched him for some mediocre quarterbacks because I thought he was going to get mollywopped by Dallas, and man, I lost that league because of that decision.
I mean, it's understandable. And like, we can sit here as NFL/fantasy analysts, what you want to call us, and sit here and say, this is why you don't do this, and here's why. And you provide all the reasoning. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right choice, but like statistically or analytically, you shouldn't do it. And sometimes it bites you in the ass, and it did in this instance. So very unfortunate.
It's still gambling.
It is. And I think that's why we all kind of like it a little bit, is because there is that edge of gambling. So I agree. Let's go over to studs and duds. Scotty, why don't you kick us off, my friend?
Yeah, with my stud of the week, I'm going with Mr. Deebo Samuel. This guy talked a tremendous amount of shit ahead of this game against the Eagles. And he was just all over social media, all over headlines, just talking shit. And then he came out and backed it up. He did lose a fumble, which was tough. But outside of that, he went 4 for 4, 116 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, Deebo, king. Talk your shit, bro. It was awesome.
Well, yeah, and like he had been saying, like, because Purdy obviously got hurt in the championship game last season to go to the Super Bowl. And Deebo said if Purdy doesn't get hurt, we win that and we go to the Super Bowl. And everybody's like, okay, shut the hell up. And then we saw that happen. So we're going to talk more about that game. I don't want to go too far in the rabbit hole just yet, but definitely deserves stud of the week. I could not agree with you more. I'm going to take the reins now and bring you my dud of the week, that being Dre Greenlaw, linebacker for the Eagles. We're still staying in the same game. He went up to, he had gotten like ran out of bounds or ran a player out of bounds, and he was on the Eagles sideline, and 49ers linebacker, he flicked the Eagles head of security right in the nose. It was like kind of like he meant to hit him in the face. I'm not sure exactly what he was trying to do, but it looked like
challenging him to a duel. It looked like he was slapping him with the white glove.
That's kind of what it looked like.
Yeah.
And I watched it, and then I watched the replay and was just baffled. And I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? So he got ejected from the game. The head of security got ejected from the game, which seems like a security issue. And it was just a mess. And I was just like, Dre, what are you looking to gain from this? Like, are you happy you did that? So, dud of the week, you have to be smarter than that. And while comical, was a very poor choice. So
I didn't consider the security implications of removing the head of security. It's like, this guy messed up. Yeah. We're going to put everybody in danger. Yeah. The game is now in danger.
Yeah, from a Philly standpoint, Dom DeSandro is the head of security. He's like a celebrity within the Eagles organization. He's been there for over like 20 years doing this. So he's a mainstay. He was definitely mixing it up. And if you pull up his picture online, you see him for like 1 second, like, oh yeah, this guy's a Philly fan for sure.
What I also just don't understand is he really didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, he must have said some shit.
He had to have. But like, how do you also, you're just like, you know what? We don't need our head of security. Get him out of here.
Yeah, pretty sure that's how like 9/11 happened. We're just like,
pretty much
get the head of security out of here. We don't need it. Yeah, it's just asking for trouble.
I didn't understand it. Dre Greenlaw definitely earns dud of the week, and while comical, just a complete asinine move.
That's hilarious.
I can't. I have no idea why that one happened. But Alan, why don't you take over? Man?
Yeah, my stud of the week is the Chargers covering. If you got them at 5 or 4 and a hook on the spread, the coolest thing ever is you only score 6 points, but you cover a 5-point spread. And against the Patriots, 6-0 was your final. It was a barn burner. I saw things online that said they should give money back to everybody that attended that game for having to pay to attend that game. But that's my stud of the week. That is super cool if you can actually cover a 5-point spread with only scoring 6 points. That's top tier. So kudos to the Chargers for covering that spread.
Yeah, it was weird because this is we'll talk a little bit more about this game in a second, but this is the score. Like if you just saw the score, you'd assume they were in like 1.5 feet of snow and like they couldn't throw the ball. They couldn't see more than 5 yards because it was a blizzard out. No, it was regular. They just couldn't play offense.
Terrible game. Just a terrible ass NFL game. Yeah. All right. Why don't you take the reins again here, Scotty?
Yeah, this one was rough. I'm sure everyone has seen this clip now. It's not something I don't think we should show again because I hate seeing videos like this of people getting just gruesomely injured. But there was that guy on the chain gang. I don't even remember which game it was. I don't remember who hit him. But
it was Kamara went out of bounds.
Yeah, it was
he
Kamara.
rolled up
that's
on
right.
his leg.
Yeah, he got this
Straight to
guy
jail.
on the chain game got rolled up on, and you saw him get knocked down, and then the camera was kind of looking at Kamara, but in the background, you see this guy holding his leg up, and at the bottom half of his leg is just like dangling. It was like, oh my God, that guy is
health
fucked.
insurance. Do you think like their health insurance covers that?
Well, I hope so.
Like, I would be genuinely curious. And also, do they have backup chain gang members? Like, is there like a backup?
Question. So this brings a really good question. Are chain gang like employed by the NFL? Is it like back in our like middle school days of playing football where it's just like a dad? Is it one of the dads holding the chain gang, or is this an NFL employee? Because it changes things.
Derek Carr's father.
So Carr's dad is working the chain gang.
But do they have backup chain gang members? That's
they just
something
pull somebody
else
from the crowd. They probably consult the head of security and tell him to get somebody. So it's a good thing this happened in this game.
That's a good point.
Okay, this also underscores something. How does freaking tennis have like this technology where it can see the ball like land within a millimeter in or out, but yet we still have these guys holding up these signs and chains and just like walking up and down the field? Like, this might be on the fast track. This guy's broken leg might fast track us to technology.
Yeah. I think a lot of football fans push back against the automated stuff. Like, they like the human element, but it is ridiculous when you think about it. Like, you think about just the spot of the ball, and then they have to bring out the chains to measure it. Like, you're telling me there's no error? Like, you're talking about a matter of inches that could make or break a drive for a team. You're telling me there's no error at all? This guy spotted exactly right, and this chain gang guy didn't move an inch? Like, dude, that's such bullshit.
It's like measuring things when you're little and you put your hands up like this and you measure it and you like try to walk to like where it is. Like, that's like what they do. Like, let me measure how far from the chains. Okay, let me run to the ball.
Okay, there we go. That's about right.
He's short.
Yeah, like, oh damn, and then everybody's just like,
Super Bowl chances are over.
Yeah, like it is a really good point. I don't know why you wouldn't have more analytics involved, or like, like the
it's
human
just like a laser line.
It is
laser line. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, you can go to Menards and get one of those. It'd be better.
This dude's in the hospital, like in sheer pain because we haven't advanced as an NFL society to incorporate technology.
Playing football like fucking pilgrims.
Oh shit. All right. Well, I'm going to bring you my stud of the week. There's an error for those watching the live stream. There's an error on the ticker, but it's going to be Sean McVay. He is my stud of the week. It was mostly a joke, but Sean McVay had come out and was asked why Kyren Williams was continued to be utilized after they had apparently won the game. And Sean McVay had stated, well, he's on my fantasy team. While it was more of a comical relief than anything else, I just wanted to point this out because it made me love Sean McVay just a little bit more. Like, obviously, Sean McVay is not playing fantasy football, or maybe he is in the secret and he has Kyren Williams, but I tend to think that that's probably not the case. But I love the comedic humor that he brings and the fact that he realizes, like, hey, people care about this kind of stuff. And while a lot of players and coaches come out and say, we don't give a shit about your fantasy teams, like, for him to say that was like on the other side of the coin. And it was like, no, I'm doing it for the fantasy players. Like, that was really cool because he could have just kneeled the ball and been done with it. And instead he gave Kyren Williams the ball and he got a touchdown. And as a Kyren Williams owner, I was very thankful. But it just, I love the comedic side of things where Sean McVay, instead of pushing it away, grasps it and is like, yo, I'm looking out for you guys, whether he is or not. It was nice to see. So I think he deserves stud of the week for that reason.
It is good when people in the NFL, because obviously, like, if you're a head coach, it's a very high stress environment. Like, it's a very difficult job in so many different ways. But it's good when these professionals take a step back and realize we're in the entertainment business, right? People watch us for entertainment. So you want to have a goofy personality. You want to be able to joke around a little bit. So I appreciate it as well.
I like Sean McVay, and it made me like.
So Kyren Williams is on Sean McVay's fantasy team. I think we can pretty much say emphatically that Bijan Robinson is not on Arthur Smith's fantasy team.
No.
We could use the transitive property, like be like we could probably go by the NFL head coaches and be like, I know who is not on your fantasy team based on how this shit is rolling out. Like, Dan Campbell does not have Jahmyr Gibbs on his fantasy team at all. No.
Maybe we should do some deep dive and figure that out, because that would be a really fun segment. But
I think we need to.
All right, Alan, take it over.
Yeah, my dud of the week is the CFP committee, or the College Football Playoff Committee. If you follow college football, or you just happen to be on Twitter, or you are a sports fan at all, you probably have seen the dramatic conclusion of the college football season, where we had some undefeateds that were left out, and they are my dud because they left an undefeated conference champion out of the college football playoff, a team that had beaten 2 SEC teams through the year. One of them is probably going to be the Heisman winner, and beat SEC team in their own house with their backup quarterback, and were left out because they wanted to put Alabama in. Now, I will say 2 things. One, they're my dud because I thought that was just bullshit. Like, if you're undefeated, you won your conference, like, you should give those kids a chance to fight for a championship. But the flip side, I do think they got the best teams overall. If you were to like put a gun to my head, I think they did. But I had to put them in as a dud because I thought that was just bullshit. I think you just got to let them play out. Your job isn't to put the best Vegas spreads together. Your job is to reward the kids for having a good season.
Yeah, can you imagine just being a player on this Florida State team? You're a player in Florida State.
So, Scotty, before I just want to cut you off, for anybody who does not follow college football, Florida State is the team that Alan's referring to. So Florida State is the team that went undefeated that was left out of the college football playoff contention. So there's only 4 teams. Like I said, if you don't follow college football, I just want to give everybody
I'm assuming everybody did, but yes, this is good.
So there's only 4 teams that are allowed into the college football playoffs, and that is going to change in the following year, and it's going to go to, I believe, 8 teams. Is that correct?
I think 12, right? Isn't
8
it
or 12? I don't know. It's more.
It's more teams, which it should be, but and more is better. But Florida State, who went undefeated, was left out of the top 4 to go make a run for a national championship, and the 4 teams being not in particular order but it was Washington, Alabama, Oregon, and I can't remember.
Michigan,
thank you. So those 4 teams made it in, and Florida State, who was undefeated, did not get in. So I apologize for interrupting you, Scotty. I just want to give everybody the info if they didn't have it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, all these kids on this Florida State team did literally every single thing in their power to make it to the playoffs. Like, they could not have done anything more. And you can look at strength of schedule, you can look at the quarterback injury, whatever, and say, there are so many reasons why they shouldn't be allowed. But it's like, dude, these are kids who won every single game, including their conference championship. It is crazy. Although I do have to admit, anyone who follows college football knew that if Alabama won, this was a real possibility. And so I was pulling hard for Alabama because I just wanted the chaos. I wanted everyone to piss.
Yeah, to tie a bow on this really quickly, could you imagine, and this is mostly why a lot of people think NFL is king, but could you imagine if there was a selection committee to get into the playoffs to play for the Super Bowl and one of these teams got left out? And a lot of people had used the Eagles in the past where
Nick Foles,
Carson Wentz went down and Nick Foles ended up leading the Super Bowl. But could you imagine if they were left out? Well,
it's Nick Foles.
I think that's why NFL is slowly taking over my brain as like being the superior product, because you just don't have to deal with the shit. But it does make it fun.
There was a clip circulating around with Mike Leach, who it was like 2012 or 2013 when they first moved to the 4-team playoff structure. Mike Leach came out and was like, yeah, who wouldn't love this structure? I mean, this is America. We love committees. Who should be on the committee? This guy, he doesn't know anything about football. He doesn't coach anything. He should be on the committee. And he just ranted for like 10 minutes about this process. And of course, it goes viral again now.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Leach, first and foremost, is the man. So,
yes, of course.
And he was absolutely right. Like, I think the bracket should go almost to 16 teams, or even like 25, or 24, I guess, is probably a little bit easier than 25. But like, if you're going to sit there and rank the top 25 like best college teams, but then not let them play against each other for a potential championship, I don't think that's necessarily fair. And that's why I tend to agree with you, Alan. Like, I think the sport of college football itself, and I know that we're an NFL podcast, but I think that the sport of college football itself, like, there's more intensity, there's more like passion, because those kids they haven't made it yet. You know what I mean? And like, that's what they're trying to do, is make a name for themselves and become national champions. And so you have that, and it is fun to watch. But then you have situations like this. Like, I do feel bad for Florida State kids, because they did everything right and they still got the boot. And it's not fair. So that's why I do think that the NFL is kind of king in that way, where it's like, at bare minimum, things are fair. Doesn't make you like it any more or less, but it is fair. And so I agree. I think it's kind of crap, and Florida State definitely got the short end of the stick on that one. So, all right, let's go over to the game of the week. Ladies and gentlemen, we had said on a previous show, the one right before this one, that the Eagles 49ers was hands down going to be the Leatherbrains game of the week, and it's not. We pulled our punch on this one. and we made a pivot to the Texans Broncos, which sounds absolutely disgusting. It sounds like, why should you care? But the Texans won this game 22-17. There's a couple things here to talk about for fantasy football. Of course, Dameon Pierce, he out-touched Devin Singletary in this game, and for fantasy football, that is actually something that is worth noting because he out-touched him 15-8. This looks like it could once again be Dameon Pierce's backfield. I don't know if that's going to be a trend or not, but it certainly is something that happened this last game. And Dameon Pierce, he struggled with health for a majority of this season, which has made it Devin Singletary's backfield. But perhaps that is not the end of the story here. So I wanted to bring that up, as well as, of course, Tank Dell. He got hurt. He's the star wide receiver rookie for the Texans. That was a devastating loss, and he is now done for the season, which is very, very sad, not only for fantasy football, but just if you're an NFL fan in general, I once was a Texans fan. I am no longer. And you guys are not Texans fans, but we all, before we clicked record, we had said, like, man, I'm just rooting for the Texans' success. I want the Texans to be good. It's fun. They look like a really fun team. And to see Tank Dell go down was definitely not something that anybody wanted to see for anybody who's rooting for the Texans or just the success of a franchise that has been pretty mediocre thus far. So Nico Collins, he leads the wide receiver room now with the departure of Tank Dell for the season. And then the only other things to touch on for this game is Russell Wilson threw three picks to CJ Stroud's 0. So CJ Stroud, he has been, touted as one of those rookies that has not turned the ball over much this season, which the trend has continued. I think the Cardinals game is really the only game that he has thrown multiple interceptions in a game, and he's looked really well. So I really have to tip my hat to him. And with all this being said, the Texans have a 72% chance to make the playoffs currently. My question to you, gentlemen, is, Tank Dell, he is the wide receiver 1 for this team. He is now done for the season. Do the Texans still have a shot, you think?
Well, if Nico Collins is going to get almost 200 yards receiving every game, I'd say yeah. They adjusted very well to the situation. But ultimately, CJ Stroud is looking like the kind of player that might always have a chance. Like, just with the way that he's approached football this season, he has been nothing but impressive, and he has really made this offense look explosive. And obviously, Tank Dell played a huge part in that. But if CJ Stroud's going to keep playing as solid as he has been playing, you look at the rest of their schedule, and you wouldn't have to try very hard to convince me that they're going to win a lot of the remaining games.
Jets, Titans, Browns, Titans, Colts. There's a chance.
There's a chance. I mean, I think they have a legitimate shot. I think the one thing, Scotty touching on CJ and how he has a chance, I think this game for me was he out Russell Wilson. Like, he just controlled it, took what was there, got him downfield, controlled the ball, didn't turn it over. And then Russell did the things opposite of what got them on this winning streak, and what it was turning the ball over. That last one obviously had to go to the end zone because they were trying to win the game. So that the third one is kind of, I always hate that because it shows up as he threw 3 picks, but really, I mean, you're trying to win a game. Sometimes that's just going to fucking happen. But they turned it over. They didn't convert like they normally do. They took some shots. They didn't convert. So it's just, they out Broncos the Broncos, and that's why they were kind of similar teams. And this was, a lot of national pundits were excited for this game because it was 2 teams fighting for playoff spots, right? Like, they were trying to get in. And so this is like kind of the most dire needs, where maybe some of the other games are not fighting for it as quite yet, but it was a good game. I thought it was a really good game, and Broncos had a good run. They still have a lot to play for. The division is still in play for them. They're not out of that either. So there's a lot here, but it was cool to see them go head to head.
Do you guys think that this breaks the curse that I started on this podcast?
I would say probably.
Do you think me saying that reinstills the curse?
Probably.
Is it back now that I just said that?
So here's the
thing. Can I knock on wood or something?
No, here's where I'm a little upset with you, because as a Chiefs fan, what is still in play is the division. So they could still come back and win the division. So the ultimate summation of this curse is they actually win the division this year, and I have to watch you try to own that.
That might be the last you ever see of me.
Oh,
I might go dark.
Well, I mean, the Broncos, they have a 21% chance to make the playoffs right now. So it's not without the realm of possibility. It is unlikely at 21%, but that doesn't mean that it's not impossible. Their next 5 games are Chargers, Lions, Patriots, Chargers, Raiders. So they beat the Chargers both times, and they beat the Patriots and maybe the Raiders. Like, there is a legitimate chance that they go to the playoffs, whether that be wild card or win the division. I don't see winning the division as something that's going to happen with the Chiefs standing as tall as they are, but it's interesting. So let me ask you guys both this before we move on here. Texans, they go into the playoffs this year. We're brainstorming ahead. You're nodding your head, yes. Scotty, Allen, you agree. I also agree. I think the Texans are going to go to the playoffs. I don't know how long of a stint they're going to have there, but I do think that they make it. Broncos, are they going to the playoffs? Yes or no?
No.
Okay.
Negative.
I agree with that. And that's statistics. Obviously, we gave all the statistics just a moment ago, but I just don't think that they're there. I don't think that it's going to happen, and I tend to agree with both of you guys on that one.
Yeah, if they can manage to force 5 turnovers per game, then maybe. But I don't think that's
there is a specific game script that the Broncos follow, and they have followed, and it's worked out for them. And they beat some really good teams doing it. But when it deviates from that script even a little bit, I think it just puts them behind, because as well as Russell's playing, he hasn't necessarily been the reason they were winning, as far as, oh, he's just like torching them. He's throwing for like 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, it wasn't like that, but he was. I did some digging before this game, and where he was pacing was pretty much on par with what he was doing with the Seahawks. Like, this is kind of the version that you get. Like, he'll take some deep shots, he'll control it, but he lets his defense kind of set the tone. Then he complements it with good ball control and taking care. And so when it deviates from that, this is kind of what you get. But
he's a game manager. That's what Russell Wilson is.
Yep. They dug themselves in too much of a hole early in the season, I think, to make the playoffs now.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so let's move on to another matchup, which I don't know about you guys, maybe the most exciting football I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat for all 6 points of this game. It was just incredible. The Chargers versus Patriots, in all reality, might be the worst game of football I've ever watched. It was just terrible. So let me just run through this real quick. So each team had a total of 13 first downs. Each team ran 61 and then 62 plays. Each team had 8 punts and then 7 punts. Each team had more punt yards than offensive yards, which is disgusting. And 28 minutes of possession, 31 minutes of possession, and 0 touchdowns to go around. So you basically just watched a bunch of grown men run around on a field for a while, and nothing happened. It was very exciting.
Admittedly, I turned this game off at like halftime. I'm going to be honest with you both. I couldn't watch it anymore.
I told you guys before we started recording, like, I was out running errands, so I was listening to the Broncos Texans game, but I didn't even know this game was happening until I go and check the scores, and it was one of those things. You ever open your phone and then you check the score and it's like the app's not updating? You're like, what the hell? This isn't updating. I literally looked at that and I thought my phone hadn't updated. I was like, oh, what was the score? What was the score? And I clicked it a few times. I'm like, oh, it was 6-0. Could you imagine being the firework operator at Gillette Stadium for the Patriots and like just being like, you're ready to go? Like, well, good news, guys. We saved money on fireworks this week.
That's true. I wonder if that's just Bill Belichick being frugal. He's like, oh, we can't afford the firework display this week.
He's not just the head coach; he is the GM, so he's got to be looking out for funds.
He's a big picture kind of guy.
Yeah, he's like, you know what? Yeah, it was gross, and like we've had a lot of conversation about Brandon Staley. We've had a conversation about this Chargers, team in general. Where do you go from here? Where do you, you guys aren't, you guys are both Chiefs fans, and the Chargers are in your division, so you're not going to root for their success. But like, what, putting your bias aside of a Chiefs fan, like, where do the Chargers go from here? Because they're aging. Brandon Staley, in my opinion, does not seem like he's the answer. Like, I think the Chargers are going to move on from Brandon Staley after this year, as I think that they should. Is that something you guys agree with? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's the very first step. Yeah.
Okay.
That's before you make any drastic moves, you need to get a new head coach in there and see if they can reinvigorate this offense.
Here's what I would do. Like, do you believe in Kellen Moore? Like, do you think he's the offensive guy? Do you think he is? And that's the decision the Chargers are going to have to make, because what's ultimately going to happen is Kellen Moore is going to get courted by some teams, and he's already been linked to a few jobs as being like a favorite.
David Tepper with the Panthers is one.
Yeah, like his name's been floated around. And so what you have to, if you're the Chargers, what you have to quickly like evaluate is Kellen Moore worth it? Like, do we fire and put him in as interim and then make, secure him for right now, see how he does? If I'm the Chargers, I think that's the route you have to go. You already know you're going to move on from him. You might as well fire him, give Kellen Moore the interim, see what happens to the team at the end of the year. If you start to see an uptick, boom, now you can give the guy an audition. I think. So why not do it now? Well, this is the Chargers. This is why they're stupid more times than they're smart, because if they don't and they wait till the end of the year and then Kellen Moore gets courted and he's gone and he ends up being great, you had him in your back pocket. You already know you want to get rid of this coach. I think they should, but I think I don't know what they're waiting on. Like, I would have already gotten rid of him and put Kellen Moore as the interim.
I'm having deja vu from this conversation because this is exactly what I said about the Commanders. They're in the exact same situation. Fire the head coach, give your new up-and-coming offensive coordinator an opportunity to interview for this job, and then at the end of the season, or you at least have a better idea if you want to keep him on board or go a different route. It is mind-numbing to me that these two organizations haven't done this, especially Staley. We've been talking about firing Brandon Staley for years. Like, it's time for him to go.
Yeah, no, and that so that's piece one. But you also look at it, like I mentioned, David Tepper. He's the owner of the Panthers. He is one of the candidates that has come out and said he wants Kellen Moore as his head coach to help that offense. And comically enough, Kellen Moore said, "There's not much that gets me excited about going to the Panthers." Well, I mean, why should there? You have a rookie quarterback with a bunch of aging assets and no prospect for the future because you gave away a bunch of picks to get Bryce Young, and it hasn't been working out in their favor. I don't know what you do with the Chargers, because the Chargers, are they not heading for a very similar direction at this point? I mean, Quentin Johnson, rookie wide receiver, was the first wide receiver drafted in this last draft here. Where has Quentin Johnson been? Quentin Johnson statistically is a bust. I mean, he drops a lot of balls.
Here are the players taken after Quentin Johnson, just for your record. And I think it's hilarious because the Chargers replaced their slow aging wide receivers with a slow wide receiver, which is hilarious, very on brand. The wide receivers taken after Quentin Johnson: Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Josh Downs, Michael Wilson, and then, of course, Pook. So, those are all guys that have more yards taken after.
They're on the field for their teams. They're getting usage.
What a miss.
Quentin Johnson is not on the field. He's not getting utilized. And is that because of his talent level? Sure, I'm sure there's an argument to be made there. But also, you used a first-round pick on this guy. He should be leaned on heavily, especially with Mike Williams being done for the season. So, and then you have Keenan Allen on the other side of the ball. These are aging assets. Austin Eckler, he's probably not going to be around next year. So
he's looked pretty bad too the last couple
of years.
And
they just paid Herbert, so they're locked into big boy money with him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me ask you this before we move on. Last question: are the Chargers repeating the same thing that they're kind of like a Phillip Rivers-esque momentum, where they're going to be
for a long time?
Yeah, they're going to be the Chargers, and they're not going to be great. They're not going to be terrible. They're just going to be kind of there. That's where I see them at, and that's unless they do something drastic here in this offseason, that's where I see the Chargers next season and for seasons to come.
Let's think for a second too about you mentioned Tepper trying to recruit Kellen Moore over to the Panthers, and you correctly stated, is this not exactly where the Chargers are also going? Is Kellen Moore looking at this organization like, I'm going to take a different job as soon as it presents itself, and one will present itself to him. So maybe not with the Panthers, but somewhere, even if it's a lateral move like Bieniemy did, just to get into a better organization with a better future. I think it would be best for the Chargers to make Kellen Moore interim head coach right now, and I think that would lock him in better than how he is. But if they wait till the end of the season and they say, hey, Kellen Moore, you want to interview for this head coaching job? And he looks at that and looks at Carolina and says, I'm going to go with option C. And I think that's a real possibility right now.
If the Chargers still, I think, have something more to be excited about than the Panthers. Yeah, that's not saying a lot, I think, because it's comparing potatoes. But I do think that the Chargers are in a little bit more favorable situation than the Panthers are right now, which is not much. But
yeah,
I think there is a world in which Kellen Moore just says, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to go somewhere else. And if that means I need to be an OC, that's fine with me. He goes back.
True.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. To conclude this conversation, that game was terrible. I hate that the NFL puts us through this, but you know what? Shitty teams have to play each other at some point because that's just the way the cookie crumbles with schedules. So
it wasn't in prime time, so is what
Thank God.
Yeah. All right, we talked a lot of shit about Brandon Staley. Maybe it's time we continue to talk shit, or maybe I continue to talk shit about Dan Campbell because he has reverted right back to his old ways. They did win the game, so credit where credit is due. They did enough to win, so that's really all that matters. But from a fantasy perspective, we're dealing with more of the same here with Montgomery. Let me just read you the stat line. David Montgomery, He carried the ball 18 times for a total of 56 yards, 3.1 yards per carry. Gibbs carried the ball 8 times for 60 yards, 7.5 yards per carry. I think the game script kind of led Monty to get a little bit more work, but still, the fact that he got 10 more carries than Gibbs, and Gibbs wasn't used at all out of the backfield. I think he saw 2 targets. It's just criminal that they are not using this player like they should be, and you can see when he's on the field, he is tremendously effective. And then on top of that, we've talked about the Lions a lot. Obviously, I think they are still a very, very good competitive team. When their offense is on, it seems like they're almost unstoppable. And their defense has not been great all year, but they haven't been doing enough to lose them games, and that's the same here. But I do want to focus on the defense a little bit because this is really becoming an issue in Detroit. This is a defense that is bottom 10 in touchdowns allowed. It's bottom 12 in average pass yards allowed, and it's bottom 3 in red zone defense. This is kind of a bad defense, and they're being carried by an offense that's able to score points. But once you get into the playoffs, this is going to be a real problem.
Yes, it will. You're okay. Look, I've said it I said it before the season even started. I'm a pseudo Lions fan. Yeah, there's a Cardinals flag hanging up behind me. Yeah, I'm wearing a Cardinals hat, and I am a Cardinals fan. But I am a pseudo Lions fan, at least this season. And more than anything else, I'm a Dan Campbell fan. But I agree with you, Scotty. And I don't know how Jahmyr Gibbs isn't used. I think part of it for you is the spitefulness that drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and or traded for him. But I understand where you're coming from. I do. And
you can't say I'm spiteful and right at the same time. I'm either right or irrational.
You can be both. I think you can be both.
In this case, I'm irrational about a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm not irrational about this. This is what I'm right about.
Well,
I'm wrong a lot, but this time,
but this?
Yeah, but this is different.
I'm not.
The Lions are really interesting. Are the Lions going to go to the Super Bowl? Absolutely not. But what really excites me is the Lions haven't been this good, I think, since 1962, I think it is. And they haven't gone to the playoffs, and I don't even know the year. And it's so, like, you just have to be like a home, like, regardless of what team you root for, like, you just kind of got to be happy for the Lions that they've actually found some sort of success. I agree with you. And the Jahmyr Gibbs usage thing is something that's really interesting because you look at it and you can kind of compare it to Arthur Smith and Bijan Robinson, right? Like that's a very similar usage in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, the Lions are finding ways to win games. And that's where the any given Sunday conversation comes into play. And we've had this conversation before, but like winning in the NFL is not an easy thing to do. I expected this game to be like, it's almost like the Lions hit like cruise control here after they got a really heavy lead at the very beginning.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Exactly what I was going to say.
They looked great at the beginning, and then they just kind of like sputtered out, and we're like, you know what? We have this in the bag. We don't need to worry about this. And then all of a sudden they needed to worry about it. I think the Lions defense still has some work to be done. Aiden Hutchinson is a freaking monster. I'm excited for him. He's a young second-year defensive tackle that looks phenomenal. They still need some pieces there. But I think, more than anything else, the Lions are showing promise. I don't know why you draft Gibbs that early and he's not the focal back. But the other side of this coin is David Montgomery, they signed in the offseason to a 3-year deal. Okay? And a 3-year deal, they'll probably want to squeeze as much juice out of this guy as they can while there's still tread on it. You know what I mean? So they probably drafted Gibbs with the intent of not burning out all the rubber on his tires right at the very beginning when they have this other guy who can still get it done. In long term for them, it's not nearly as big of a, well, what the fuck did we do? We gave it to our rookie 25 times, and now by year 3, he's, limping around because he's dealing with injury. That's kind of what I see here. And I think, honest to God, this next season, I think it's going to be more of a split backfield as well. I don't think it's going anywhere because while David Montgomery is on the field, he has usage. Like he's not a bad runner. He's not Christian McCaffrey, but nobody's Christian McCaffrey. You know what I mean? And so you take David Montgomery, you give him the ball, you know that he's still able to get it done. I know statistically there's a huge variance there, but
and that's kind of why you mentioned Arthur Smith, and Dan Campbell in this case is not nearly as bad as Arthur Smith because Monty has actually been effective. He's been a good running back, and my issue with it is okay. If you want to have a split backfield, especially to preserve your rookie, that makes perfect sense. But why is it so drastically different in terms of the number of carries they get? To me, you have this explosive back. This game sort of came down to the wire when it looks like it shouldn't have. that's the point where you throw your explosive players in and you give them the ball. And it seems like Dan Campbell, it's been a little bit better recently, but throughout the course of the entire season, it just seems like he is reluctant to give his most explosive playmaker, arguably, the ball, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, and I don't know if that will change. I really don't, because I think David Montgomery is still a usable running back, and that's kind of the mentality that perhaps he carries and this Lion organization carries is let's keep Gibbs around. I think the Lions, I think they know they're not Super Bowl bound. Like, they look at their roster, they look at the talent, and they say, you know what? We're competitive, and it's any given Sunday, and obviously they're going to want to try and make a push for it. But I think, in the back of their minds, they probably also realize we have a lot of youthful talent here. Let's try and preserve some of this. Let's see what we can do with our talent, but let's also get ready to reload and make an even grander push in seasons to come. And maybe, that's just me speaking out loud. I don't know if there's anything to grasp onto there, but that's kind of how I think that perhaps they look at this situation, because they don't want Gibbs to get hurt for a season in which, when they really want to make a push, I think that's when we're really going to see Jahmyr Gibbs. You know what I mean?
I think they're making a push right now, and I think there's no doubt that everyone in that locker room thinks they have a real chance. And honestly, they might. I mean, when this team is on and Jared Goff is on, this team can compete with anybody. There's no doubt about it. They just have to make sure they don't give up a ton of points. But
I mean, they're tied for second in the NFC, and they are a game out of first right now. If you look
I'm not trying to discredit.
No, I know that. I'm just saying I hear what you're saying, because it does feel like there might be a year early a little bit with how this goes, which I would totally understand. But I think for me, that sentiment, I hope, doesn't carry into Dan Campbell, because that, going back to your point about that game, like, I felt like it was score a bunch, run away, and hide. And, I don't think that'll work in the playoffs, because we've seen teams just implode and melt in playoffs when they try to do that. So I hope he learns.
No, and I agree. I mean, let's just have an honest conversation. We're just here for half a second. The Lions aren't going to the Super Bowl. They're not. And that's coming from somebody who's been rooting for them all season. Like, you can't sit here and tell me the Lions are the best.
I don't know, man. All it takes is one game. You catch a heater. We've had teams catch heaters, like,
sure, and any given Sunday,
make their way to the Super Bowl that probably had no business being there. Especially to start the playoffs. So I don't know. I think they're capable of it. I think they have the skill players to do it. Are they the favorites? No. But do they have a shot? Yeah. I mean, I think they're have just as good a shot as anybody or any of those top teams in the NFC right now.
I don't know if I agree with that. And that's coming from somebody who has been rooting for them all season, because I watch the things that they're doing. Oh, wow, damn. You are a Dan Campbell fan.
You can't even be a pseudo fan, right?
It's situations like this game exactly that really make me sit there and question, are they there yet? And they're close, but I don't think that they... I've watched all the Lion games, and they haven't put together a full 4 quarters yet, where I've just been like, you know what? They've been absolutely dominant this entire time. If there's any game that was, it was probably the Chiefs game, to be honest with you. Like, that is the one game where I can sit there and say, you guys played a hell of 4 quarters, and you did a great job. Kudos to you guys. But all the other games, like just this last one, they got up early, and then they hit cruise, and it shows. So I want to see that again. And I also see, and I love Dan Campbell, and I don't want to sit here and seem like I'm bashing on him, but some of the coaching decisions he makes.
You can bash on him.
I won't. But, like going for it on 4th down on your own 30-yard line in the 3rd quarter, like that shit like that just doesn't make sense to me. And so there's some things that I think need learning there and need changing before I can really get on board for them being Super Bowl caliber team. I think they're frisky, and I think they could, but I think if I was, to sit here and honestly tell you, gentlemen, I don't think it's going to happen this year, and I don't.
Just to put a bow on it, you can say that about the Lions, and that's perfectly fair. They don't look like they would dominate every other team, but every other team, regardless of how dominant they've been in some games, has not looked perfect all season. I mean, the 49ers are probably the closest, and they dropped 3 games in a row where they looked like they couldn't figure anything out. So I really do think once you get to the playoffs, it's up in the air. I think any one of these top teams has the capability to win, including the Lions.
Which is fun. And that's what I hope. I think that's what makes the NFL fun. Is like when you do have everybody's kind of frisky. You have up and down teams. Now, obviously, for you guys, you probably are less inclined to agree with me because you guys have been dominant for so long as the Chiefs fans. But that's what I like. And you know what? I do hope they do have a good run, but I can't sit here and tell you I think it's going to happen. So let's move over to the injuries of note. There is, for fantasy football implications, people got hurt. We don't root for injury here, but we're going to give you the information that you need to make some decisions. So, of course, we talked about Tank Dell at the beginning of the episode. He has a broken fibula, and he is out for the season now. What I don't understand, well, you guys had brought this up before we recorded, and you'd said, you know, and NFL analysts and even the announcers of this game had said, why are you using a 160-pound, 5'10 wide receiver in your goal line situation as a lead blocker? Shit like this happens when you do that. I agree with you, but I also point out that how else would you do it? Like, Tank Dell's very obviously a threat, so defenses are going to key on him. And if you take him off the field, does that not kind of show your hand as far as what a play might potentially be? That's my question to you boys.
Yeah, every opponent of the Eagles knows when they're going to do the tush push, but it doesn't matter. So you just have to run your play effectively. It doesn't matter. If you're a foot from the goal line, oftentimes you can impose your will, and they might know exactly what's coming. Everybody in the stadium might know what play is coming. You just have to do it. I don't know. Put them out wide.
I was going to say, I appreciate. Yeah, I like where Slaps where you're going with that. But yeah, what Matt just said. Then just put them out on the edge and just take somebody out of the box or make them like, you know, look at that side of the field just a little bit differently. I think that's him like leading through the hole was insane to me. It's like, I mean, good for them. They trust him to do that. I think it was just, and obviously it's a freak injury. Like he could probably do that, you know, 10 times before that would happen. Like obviously there's a lot of things that play into that overall, but in the moment it was like, why? This poor dude is just getting rolled up on and breaking his leg, just blocking for a yard that you had a few other plays to get as well.
No, I get it. And I don't know. I mean, it sucks, and I feel bad for anybody that rosters Tank Dell and Texans fans in general because he's been electric. But Kenny Pickett, also another injury. He has an ankle injury. He will miss a few weeks, meaning Mitchell Trubisky. Hell yeah, bro. We'll be back, baby.
It's Trubisky season. I hope he gets in another locker room fist fight.
Me too.
I love those storylines.
They also just signed Trace McSorley. It sounds like Pickett's actually having surgery.
Okay. Well, I don't think they're missing much, to be honest with you. Derek Carr is in concussion protocol. Derrick Henry was announced that he was in concussion protocol, and then earlier today, Mike Vrabel, head coach for the Titans, said that Derrick Henry was not in concussion protocol. So follow that story on your own because I am trying to follow it, and it's very, very difficult because I don't know if he's in concussion protocol or not, but we put him on our injury notes because...
Well, concussions generally this season have been really weird because we've had several players this season who are in concussion protocol for like a day and a half, and then they take them out, which has not been the case because the NFL's taken so much heat over all these head injuries that they're like, if you're in concussion protocol, you're not playing next week, and you might miss the following game after that. And this season, it's almost just like, whatever.
I mean,
I think it's PR. Like Tua last season, like when he got his concussion, like that looked really bad on the field. So maybe some of it has to do with PR. And I know that we're making light of this in a very serious, like concussions are not a joke, but also
I can joke about concussions.
Well, you can because what happens, and I don't know if anybody on the show knows this or not, but for all of our listeners out there, whenever an NFL player has an injury, we put Scotty through that same injury so he can tell us kind of like how he's feeling as our pseudo NFL player. So
yeah, ribs, had a lot of concussions. I've had them all.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that currently you're not on the concussion protocol, but Derrick Henry may or may not be, so he's also kind of a question mark. Christian Watson, hamstring injury. He is. We're still waiting for more news on that at the moment, but it's likely he will probably miss at least the next game and maybe some more games to follow.
Yeah, Christian Watson's been dealing with this hamstring injury since last season. I mean, he had a hamstring injury that kept him out for a while, and then this offseason he kept him out for a little bit into the beginning of the season, and now again, it's tough. And that's a really big hit for a team that's been playing really, really well. So we'll have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and then the last one here is Ramondre Stevenson is out with an ankle injury, so watch that and tune into our waiver wire segment where we'll tell you to pick up Zeke. All right, cool.
Maybe.
Let's just a little teaser there. Let's move over into the afternoon window / Sunday night football. So I will kick this one off. The Cardinals. This actually started as not a afternoon window game, but due to weather delays, it kind of finished there. So I figured we can put an asterisk there and talk about it here in this area. Cardinals win this one. They beat the Steelers 24-10, and I said, for those watching live, I was going to hang up the flag every time we get a dub, and I hope that it doesn't happen a whole lot more, but I was excited to see that we beat the Steelers. What I want to talk about is that there's actually some implications here that are, I think, a little bit more pertinent to discuss than most people realize. So, first and foremost, welcome back to Fantasy Football, James Conner. He went 26 for 105 and 2 for 22.5 fantasy points. I think James Conner, he should be a must start. He is a lead down back for the Cardinals. So congratulations to you and a good fantasy week. But really what I did want to talk about is this game on the surface really appears meaningless. Okay, the Cardinals beat the Steelers, but realistically, the AFC North is pretty competitive, being the Ravens, Steelers, Browns, and Bengals. So I think this loss actually has some ramifications for the Steelers. It now ties them with the Browns, and the Browns and Steelers are both 7-5. The Bengals are 5-6, and the Ravens are 9-3. I fully expect the Ravens to be the lead team for the AFC North, but this really makes, a potential wild card spot a huge question mark for this division. And I just wanted to point that out is if the Steelers continue this trend and, they lost their starting quarterback, which I don't know if that's a huge loss, but it puts this division a little bit more in question, and it kind of makes everybody else besides the Ravens potential candidates to try and make a wild card push.
Yeah, if I would have told you at the beginning of the season, all right, look at the AFC North, 3 of the 4 quarterbacks are going to get injured. Would you have ever guessed Lamar Jackson is the last man standing? No. But the Ravens really lucked out on that one.
So true. Well, he's next.
Damn. Knock on wood.
We don't root for injuries.
We don't root for it. I was just saying he would be next. He would be the next guy. That's
it's inevitable.
Factual. That's the factual thing. He would have to be the next one. This division's wild. I think the Browns. Yeah, I mean, the Ravens, if you're a Ravens fan right now and you're looking at this division, you're like, whew, thank God. We can just kind of coast, just try to secure that, because they were on a bye this week, and you can just – the Bengals lose tonight, and then you're just like, we are severely – I mean, they're already in severe coast mode, so now they just got to just
fuck it up.
Keep their shit together, and I think they should be favorites to have the number 1 overall seed and win and clinch the AFC North.
Agreed. All right, Alan, we'll let you run with it.
Yeah, I want to talk about my boy Gardner Minshew. Minshew Mania continues. I just wanted to give a shout out to my boy. I had been starting him pretty religiously over the last few weeks. We even talked about it in our chat. Helped the Colts win 4th in a row. Threw for 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the game winner in overtime to beat the Titans 31-28. I was excited for him. Excited for the Colts. Who would have thought they're firmly in the playoff picture as well. Levis didn't play terrible at all. I just wanted to point that out. I know Will Levis has kind of had his ups and downs, but he didn't look terrible today. Obviously had it into overtime. But it was also just a big stat game. Pittman, 105 and a touchdown. Hopkins, 75 yards and a touchdown. Henry, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 concussion. And AFC South.
Maybe. Put a question mark there.
maybe he did. AFC South getting entertaining. Houston and Indy at 7-5, and then Jacksonville leading at 8-3, which I think is it's an interesting division. I think it's a fun division. If you're not paying attention to it, I definitely would, because it's just a fun race. I always like these little storylines. They're not main storylines, like they're not Eagles 49ers, but they're fun. And I think it's neat that Minshew Mania is back.
I agree with you. I do love Uncle Rico, but the AFC South in general is something that I'm glad you brought this up, because this is a really fun, up and coming division when you really look at it. You have Trevor Lawrence, who's a younger quarterback, and he's certainly finding success as the Jaguars lead the AFC South at 8-3. But the Colts and Texans are not far behind, both at 7-5. So realistically, this is anybody's, this is anybody's division. And the fun thing is Texans have CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback, and the Colts have Anthony Richardson, who, went on IR and is also a rookie quarterback. And that's why Gardner Minshew is starting. So the AFC South could be really fun for years to come. If the teams continue to trend in the right direction and make some of the right moves, I think the AFC South needs a little bit more love, because I think they are one of those divisions that people are going to be like, holy shit, this is a really hard division. And if the trend continues like that's where they're going. So I was excited for Minshew Mania, of course. I do love Gardner Minshew, and it was a really fun game. But, man, I'm more excited for the AFC South. All right, let's go over to the Falcons. Arthur Smith. This is painstaking, and we have a conversation about Arthur Smith every single week in my deep hatred for him. But the Falcons beat the Jets 13-8 in what will now this is going to give the Chargers-Patriots game a run for their money. I know we talked about it earlier, Scotty, and how terrible that game was. This was pretty on par for that. There was a touchdown, two touchdowns. Two touchdowns? There was a safety. I know there was a safety. I don't remember if that 8 was it. Like it was such a boring game, and I hated this game. And you could kind of see it from a mile away, right? Because neither team has an offense at all, right? They just have okay defenses. The Jets have obviously a better defense, but they lost this game. And I just wanted to bring this up because it makes me sad. Because the Falcons are leading the NFC South, meaning that they're probably going to go to the playoffs unless something changes. And that means that Arthur Smith will now be an NFL head coach for yet another season. And it's a fucking disgrace. And I just wanted to bring that up. So the Falcons, like I mentioned, are leading the division. They're 6-6, but the Bucs and Saints are both tied at 5-7. And then the Panthers at 1-11. They're officially eliminated from playoff contention. I am gunning for the Bucs or the Saints at this point. Like I'm fingers crossed that they just win out and they beat out the Falcons and they end up with the 1 seed in the NFC South. So Arthur Smith gets fired. And it makes me sad that he hasn't been, but there's a pretty good probability that Arthur Smith will be around next season. So the only other thing that I wanted to talk about in this game, other than my sadness that is Arthur Smith, is the Jets just announced before we started recording here that they're looking to make a quarterback change and put Zach Wilson back in as the starting quarterback, but he is, quote, reluctant and not all in per reports. This, to me, screams Blue Mountain State, where the guy's a backup quarterback. That's what he wants to do. And unfortunately, he might have to go back in and be the starter. How do you not want to go in and be a starting quarterback in the NFL? How are you reluctant and not all in?
I think
get this fucking guy off the roster.
This is the most relatable thing he's ever done, bro. You got a chance to be a backup quarterback? That's the coolest job ever, made by man.
No,
that's
but
dope.
But they want him to be a starter, and that's the problem.
Yeah, no, that's bad news. I don't want to be a starter either. I want to be a backup, especially if my name was Zach Wilson.
Blue Mountain State is a great show. What a great poll. Yeah, it's like if any of us at our jobs were like, "Hey, we need you to do this," I'm like, "No, I'm very reluctant, and I'm not
good,
all in.
man. I'll watch that guy do it instead."
Like you are fucking gone. The fact this is so funny to me. Like, what do you do when you just have somebody's like, "No, I'm good."
Yeah, like,
okay.
Hey, man, we need you to be the starting quarterback. Do you know how many so many people would just fucking kill for an opportunity to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And Zach Wilson is sitting here saying, I don't know if it's for me, man. Like, I'm good. Like, just...
can you blame him with how bad he's been treated by every single person, including probably his mom after he banged her friend? Like, it's just, he's got no friends in the world anymore. Everybody fucking hates him. He doesn't want to be in the limelight anymore. He's been beat down into submission.
Yeah. Take the last little scrap of potential opportunity that you have and try and prove yourself otherwise. Now, I'm not saying I want to see it, but also like as somebody that is consuming NFL content, blows my mind. I could not believe that Zach Wilson was just like, I just don't know.
Yeah,
it's just mind blowing. So I wanted to point that out because I think it's absolutely comedic and asinine, and it makes me hate Zach Wilson even more.
Yeah. All right, let's move from a bad team to a really, really good team. In fact, I think the 49ers are the best team in football right now. They look like the most complete team. They look awesome. And Hunter, me and you, we got to give each other some props here because we had a little argument with Yeti in last week's episode, and he just seemed, he didn't say this out loud, but you could tell that he was just viscerally offended by the idea that the Eagles were going to get their asses kicked, which we not only called that they were going to win, but we said, I think the Eagles are going to get beat down in this game. And that's exactly what happened here. Yeti, I love you, buddy, but you might not know ball. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't think so. I looked at him and I could tell deep down, like staring at the center of his eyes, he thought we were just two moronic mouth breathers.
Yeah.
And I was
he kept saying, oh, you really think Brock Purdy is better than Jalen Hurts? It's like, no, that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, no, but we think the 49ers are better, and this 49ers Eagle game.
Oh, and also, Yeti, I know you've been right about a lot of things I've been wrong about, so please don't give me this treatment. I don't want this in return.
Yeah. So Yeti and I have probably a tough angle at this because our cousin, who we love very deeply, is a big Eagles fan, and so I have some friends that are big Eagles fans, and so I was really hoping for their happiness. I don't like to see my family sad, and so that probably played into some of Yeti's thought process. But I was shocked by the amount. I was shocked how out of hand it got. I thought it was just a wild final score. Now, Purdy, I will say, is as good as he quote unquote looked. I mean, a lot of those were bubble screens and like some quick slants. I wouldn't say that. I mean, but hey, you know what? You get to play with the hand you're dealt.
What was the score? What was the score?
Enough said.
That's the
Enough
offense.
said.
Well, and that's what we used to do when we were talking about this game. You know, the big difference in these two teams is the Eagles need Jalen Hurts to play outstanding football for their offense to play well, because we've seen all season that they've been a little bit lackluster, just not quite as good, and it's because Jalen Hurts just hasn't been as good as he was last year. Whereas the 49ers don't need Brock Purdy to play outstanding football, they just need him to not fuck it all up. And Brock Purdy's pretty good at not fucking it all up. In fact, as of right now, I think he leads the league in completion percentage, yards per attempt, and passer rating. And again, that's not necessarily due to Brock Purdy being awesome at football. It's due to this offense and all the weapons around him and what they need him to do. And he does that very, very well. So, you know, looking at this game from the outside, the 49ers just look like the Super Bowl favorites. It just looks like if they're on their game, any team is going to have a real hard time beating them.
My future bet certainly hopes so. The 49ers beat the Eagles in every single category: total yards, passing yards, rushing yards, yards per play, first downs, fewer sacks, punts, and fewer penalties. So the 49ers looked really fucking good. The 49ers look like a, you know, and we said this, and I know we were poking fun at Yeti earlier, and I don't want to sit here and seem like that's what we're doing, but we had this conversation on Wednesday's episode, and you and I both said, like, the 49ers seem like the most complete team. We saw it. This Eagles offense does not look nearly as explosive as it did last season, and perhaps that's with the departure of Shane Steichen. Maybe that plays a very significant role that we're not fully, you know, I think metrics-wise, we can pull it up and maybe look at last year's offense to this year's offense, but this offense this year does not look nearly as explosive. I'm not sitting here saying Brock Purdy is a better quarterback, because I don't believe that for a second, and I do think the Eagles are a very competitive team. But this 49ers team is something special. I have a lot of respect for Kyle Shanahan, and this team is just all around a very elite team, and I do think the 49ers are going to the Super Bowl. I think there's no question in my mind that the 49ers are going to the Super Bowl.
Well, you mentioned Super Bowl, and on Christmas Day, Christmas evening, you have yourself a potential Super Bowl preview with the 49ers and Ravens playing that night. And so I think that'll be quite the litmus test for both of them. I do think it's a little too late. I think that 3-game skid for the 49ers might keep them out of that 1 seed, because the Eagles have a much easier end of the schedule if they can get past Dallas on Monday night to pretty much wrap it up. So that does worry me a little bit for the 49ers, because we've seen this happen in previous years where it's one team beating the other team, or, you know, during the season it happens. You're like, well, this team's better. And then you come to the playoffs and it's just like the complete opposite. If I'm the 49ers, you really got to be fingers crossed you don't have to go back to Philadelphia. You really do not want to go back to Philadelphia, because I see that game going completely differently if they have to go back, because the Eagles just didn't match intensity. They didn't come out with the same intensity. They didn't match it. I think there were some things with the game early on. You could kind of tell that they weren't converting. They could have easily gone up 14-0 on the 49ers, and they just couldn't do it. And I think if you're a 49ers fan, this is a great win. It's a regular season win, so you have to stay within that. And I think while you really want that 1 seed. You don't want to have to go back to Philadelphia, because I don't think you walk out of there with 2 wins in one season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It'll be interesting to see how the Eagles handle the Cowboys now, because you got to imagine the Eagles are coming in with a whole different mindset into this game. And obviously the Cowboys have been dominant recently, but they've also shown their weaknesses throughout the season. And, you know, looking at that matchup, just given everything that's happened, I think I might be leaning toward the Eagles winning that game, and maybe pretty handily, because they're coming in with chips on their shoulders, and I do want the Eagles to be successful. I wanted the Eagles to win this game. It's just, I don't know. They're sort of like the Chiefs in a lot of ways. They look a lot better than the Chiefs in a lot of ways, but they have a lot of the similar problems where they're just offense doesn't look like it clicks very well all the time, and it just doesn't look like they compete at that highest level like they once were. And so they've got to turn that around a little bit, and this is a great opportunity this upcoming week to do that.
You mentioned the Chiefs. Let's go do it. Let's talk about it. The Chiefs, they lost this game. They got beat by the Packers, and what I think many people are considering an upset. Go ahead.
Kind of. It was in Lambeau. We talked about it leading up to the game, that it's playing Green Bay as well as they've been playing in Lambeau. That's a real tough environment. This is what I consider to be the first game that the Chiefs lost that they didn't give away. I really felt like the Chiefs got beat on this game. A lot of fans on both sides are talking about the referees. There were a lot of very stupid calls, but the stupid calls went both ways. You know, there was a dumb call on unnecessary roughness on Patrick Mahomes when he got hit inbounds. That was a dumb call. And then, of course, to end the game, that PI that was missed, that was very obvious. So to me, you know, the refs, it sucked, but it is what it is. I mean, there were a lot of stupid calls on both sides. I just watched this game, and, you know, Alan, looking at the show notes here, it looks like me and you might have a disagreement, but watching this game, the thing that just took me aback was how dominant it looked like Green Bay was on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, obviously the Chiefs moved the ball pretty well for most of the game, so it wasn't overwhelming in that way until they got to the red zone. But it seemed like every single play, especially when Pat had to drop back, he was getting pressured in ways that he has not been pressured all season long. And then on defense, our defensive line, there were plays where A.J. Dillon was 6 yards downfield before he was touched by anybody. We were just getting demolished. It looked like Green Bay came into this game with a chip on their shoulder, and they played harder, more competitive football than the Chiefs did.
Yeah, I think nail on the head. I think that your last point. I think they didn't match. Chiefs didn't match intensity. I think the Packers came out, had a game plan, they executed it. I'm not even going to get into the refs. I don't think that really played into it. I mean, it was an 8-point game. It's not like they were getting in field goal range and it was anybody's ball game. Like, it was still a stretch to walk out of there with a win. And I agree with you. They were beat. The both lines thing, I do want to say, I don't think so. They did get some pressures, but that was when the Chiefs were rotating some tackles in and out. And so they definitely keyed in on having some miscues and some guys that don't get a lot of snaps on that O-line. But I mean, the Chiefs outrushed the Packers. Pacheco had over 100 yards. I think they were just as dominant on their O-line as the Packers were. So it's kind of a draw. I think what it came down to was the Packers just made more plays. Jordan Love just made more plays in the game that won them the game. You know, he threw it to his weapons. He had guys that could go out there and do it, and they game planned really well. I will say one thing: that field is trash. I don't know what that field was. I think everybody was slipping. Even Watson's injury, his hamstring injury, came because he was trying to kneel and he got caught in the grass, and that's what hurt his hamstring when he was trying to kneel the ball at the end of the game. That's the only reason he got hurt. Like, it was a very confusing field, but I mean, shout out to the Packers. They won. The Chiefs I think the Chiefs had like 6 injuries. 6 guys went out in this game, couple concussions. One starting safety broke his ankle. I mean, as much as we want to wax poetic and say, oh my God, this Chiefs are in trouble. Like, I mean, injuries are part of the game too. It's a war of attrition. I mean, look at the Bengals. I mean, it happens. The shit happens. And no excuses on that front, because that happens to everybody. But I think this is just kind of part of the game. I mean, you're going to have guys go down and out. The only thing I will say for the Chiefs that is somewhat optimistic is that they will get Nick Bolton back next game. They didn't have McKinnon for this one, who is a big receiving threat out of the backfield, which plays a key part of their offense and how they move the sticks. So there's some pieces they'll get back. We'll see what happens. But it's very obvious the Chiefs are not the same Chiefs as they were in the past. And I think that's why everybody's like playing on the downfall, is they're not the same as they were before. And I think that's just more of a testament to the longevity and the consistency they've had over the years, is we've expected certain things from them. And now they just look more human. And that's just how the game works. This is what the NFL wants. There's a reason why they're not getting top draft picks. And this is kind of where you are. You got to make it work, and you got to hold it together. They still need a wide receiver, man. Fucking awful.
No, and that's been the narrative all season long, and that's something we've constantly been harping on. Is they need pass catchers because everybody's dropping this damn ball. And in most defenses, it would appear as if they've figured out Travis Kelce, who has been the top threat for the Chiefs wide receiving room for the last few years, aside from Tyreek Hill when he was there. So like defenses have figured him out. And then what? You have all these wide receivers who are not a true wide receiver one. They struggle to catch the ball. And this is the product that we've seen the last few years, or this last season at least.
I saw some jokes floating around on Twitter, which I thought was pretty funny, that the reason the Chiefs didn't get that PI at the end of the game is because we don't know what a catchable ball is for Kansas City, because the ball can hit them right in the face and it's not catchable. They're just, especially MVS. MVS will drop anything. So it's like, it just wasn't catchable. It doesn't count.
I want to ask you guys this question, and I know it's going to be difficult for you guys to answer this, but I'm gonna ask you to try and put your team bias aside.
Tough.
Are the Chiefs
than you are, Matt?
I think so too.
I agree. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Are the Chiefs at this point, right now, with the roster that they have, legitimate Super Bowl contenders? And I know that we say any given Sunday. I completely understand that. But just watching the Chiefs all season long and then watching other teams like the Ravens or the Lions or the Eagles or the 49ers, are the Chiefs legitimate Super Bowl contenders? We posted something today on Twitter that asked the same question, and some Chiefs fans were saying, if Patrick Mahomes still has air in his lungs, yes. I saw other Chiefs fans who said, I don't think this is our year. I ask you both as Chiefs fans to put aside that bias and look at it and say, are you guys legitimate Super Bowl contenders?
I'll go first, Matt. There's the question within the question. Are the Chiefs Super Bowl favorites? I would say no. Are they contenders? I would say yes. If you look at the teams they beat in the AFC, I said it before we got on, they only have one AFC loss, and that was to the Broncos in Denver, where they had a shitload of turnovers. Otherwise, they've been holding their own in the AFC. And we'll see how it looks down the stretch. But from an AFC perspective, just to get to the Super Bowl, yeah, I think they're going to be contenders up to the bitter end. Now, are they as dominant? Will they be favored? Are they Super Bowl favorites? No, I don't think they are. I don't think you would say these guys are going to win a Super Bowl this year. But as far as like making it there, yeah, I think they can make it there. I think they need more to go right there. They can't have things go against them and overcome them like they have in years past. They can't do that. They can't come back and just score whenever they want, because they don't. And so that's why I think it.
Let me rephrase the question. Let me. Do the Chiefs win the Super Bowl this season?
No, not at all. I would be shocked if they made the Super Bowl this season.
Okay.
So I agree with that, but I also said the same thing last year about the Chiefs as they moved into the postseason. That I looked at the Eagles and I looked at the 49ers and I'm like, there's just no fucking way that the Chiefs can do this. And then they did. So I look at the Chiefs very similarly to the way I look at the Lions. That, it's not a complete team. There are lots of things that need to be fixed. But once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. And I think they're just as much contenders as anybody else. Now, they're not going to be, it's going to be the same thing as last playoffs, where every matchup, it's like, God, this is very nerve-wracking. Like, I'm not overly confident, but anything can happen. And again, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback of recent memory. So you anything can happen. So I'm not overly confident, but I'm optimistic.
Okay, so do they? Yes or no? Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Yes or no, Scotty? Alan says no.
I would lean more towards no.
Okay, I also would do that. And it's not to say that they won't, because we made that same bet last season, Alan. I mean, we did. We did. You and I both had money on the Eagles, and you were a Chiefs fan, and the Chiefs won it all. And
I will say this.
You can't write them off.
No, and I'll say this live, because I know we text, and a lot of things get misconstrued out of text, but I like to give Slap shit because he is a closet Chiefs hater. And
yes,
listen, and I keep going back. I'm at the highest of highs as a Chiefs fan. Like, I love listening to Sunday Night Football and the defending Super Bowl champs, and it's the Chiefs. When I was young, I would go to Super Bowl parties and wear my Chiefs gear with the assumption that I was never going to watch my team in this game. So everything from here on out is gravy. Like, while I love them and I, ride or die with them, I do understand how this works. Like, there are ebbs and flows in how these things work. Yes, Pat being there is a big key. Like, that's what you need. But they're in a lull. Like, they need to figure out how they get back, how they need to get some weapons. They don't have them right now. So they're 8-4. and it's because they have Pat. If they didn't have Pat, I think it would be the other way. They would be
100%
down. They'd be down with the Chargers. They would be struggling. Like they would have a really hard time. Like they wouldn't be sniffing the playoffs right now. And so you got to temper it with those expectations. I think the things that gets people like all irked, and even Eagles fans, like every season is its own season. Just because you were there last year and there's a lot of the same jerseys on names on the back of the jersey doesn't mean you're just going to get the same output. This isn't playing Madden. Like this isn't a video game. These are things that guys go through. You have Chris Jones in a contract that he knows. He comes out and says, this is my last year here. So how hard is he going to play? Right. Like he's not trying to get paid now by this team. So is he saving a little bit of the tank? You have guys kind of like holding back, that these wide receivers like MBS, I'm probably not going to play here anymore next year. Like Sky Moore, I'm probably not going to be here very much longer. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'm probably not going to be here. So what does that do to the locker room? So there's a lot of things that go into that for a lot of teams. And so this is where I think like, I get it. Shit happens. And so I think for Chiefs fans, like you just try to make the playoffs, see what happens. But I would not be holding my breath that they're going to make it back to the Super Bowl this year.
I love everything you said. I would like to point out I'm not a closet Chiefs hater. I am not a Chiefs fan, and I am not a Chiefs. I have said I have been rooting for the Chiefs until the end of the season. There was one guy, I wanted the Dolphins to win, and they didn't. And I was very upfront about that. Not a Chiefs hater. I just want to point that out. No.
You are.
No, I just...
Actions speak louder than words, my friend. And we see your actions every week.
What's the actions?
I could give you a whole list of them. Let me just pull up screenshots from the fucking group chat. I'll post them on Twitter.
Go ahead. Do it. Because all I did was say it's quiet in here at halftime.
So here's the thing. I will give Slaps credit on that. Like, I also love to stir the pot for like no reason because, I don't know, it's just kind of fun to do that.
It's fun to see you guys.
He's got two Chiefs. He's got two Chiefs fans here to do it too. I would be doing the exact same fucking thing.
Thank you. Okay. Well, look, here's the thing. I to conclude Chiefs talk for the week, or at least the episode, I don't think the Chiefs are going to make it either. And that's not to say that they couldn't, but I just, looking at their roster and what they've done this season, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Matt Nagy could potentially be part of the problem. And
fuck that guy.
I don't like Matt Nagy. I didn't like him when he was at the Bears, and I really don't like him with the Chiefs either.
I'm so pissed they brought him back.
Me too.
That was such a crutch.
Well, we have to love him because he was instrumental in getting Patrick Mahomes.
He got lucky. I mean,
no. If you've seen the clip of him or of Patrick Mahomes talking about it,
he gave me
like
answers.
Fed him answers to the tests and stuff.
I think that's just a testament to Matt Nagy being a moron and slimy, Patrick Mahomes just being really great. And
Nagy's.
I think, I'm not a fan of him, and I think that also could.
Also, Reed is kind of an idiot this year. That might be my hot take that'll probably get Chiefs fan. Like if I was on Chiefs Reddit, that would probably get me downvoted to hell. But
you're a Chiefs fan, and I can't sit here and even like. I just have too much respect for Mr. Reed. Coach Andy Reid.
I think his ego is getting in the way right now.
You think it's all the State Farm commercials?
I think it's he's done for something for so long, and it obviously worked last year. I think you got to look, like I just said, each season is its own, right? Yeah. It's hard to copy and paste, and even though a lot of the names are the same, it's like that's just, you can't play it the same way. But
I do think that, like, you look at the Chiefs offense and like it's kind of like the Eagles offense a little bit, where like it looks a little dilapidated at times and it doesn't look like as powerful as it did last year. And I think if we were to look at the outliers that have changed for both of these teams, they lost both their offensive coordinators. And you look at what Eric Bieniemy's doing with the Commanders, like Sam Howell, there is a reason that Sam Howell is like career or leading the NFL in passing yards and passing like attempts, and like that is indicative of Eric Bieniemy. And the same thing could be said about Shane Steichen over with the Colts. Like, they lost both their OCs, and that I think has made more of an impact than people really care to admit or realize for both of these very elite high level teams. So I think that probably plays a portion of it as well. And Matt Nagy's an idiot. Okay, let's go over to the Brainbusters, and then we'll do waiver wire, and we will get the hell out of here. We are this is a longer episode, gentlemen. So I appreciate you guys.
We talk too much.
We do talk quite a bit, but I think it's fine. We'll go with the first question here. Yeet Man 143. He says, Zach Moss or Calvin Ridley for fantasy football for the rest of the season?
That's Zach where Moss.
He is? I think I would take Zach Moss as well. I think Zach Moss is...
Jonathan Taylor might not see the field for the rest of the fantasy season. I mean, he's going to be out 3 to 5 weeks. So Zach Moss might be a top 10 running back in that span.
Yeah, I mean, just this last week,
Yeah,
Zach
you're
Moss
not
got
wrong.
19 touches. So, granted, he didn't get a touchdown. He had 51 yards in total, but 19 touches is an elite volume, and Zach
The
Moss is the
volume's there.
RB1.
When
Yeah,
I commented
mean,
on that, I forgot Taylor was hurt.
yeah, and then
I was like,
you know,
what the fuck are we doing?
also to point out, the next couple games for the Colts are Bengals, Steelers, Falcons, Raiders,
Oof.
Houston. So
2 of those are not good.
Bengals and Steelers are both bottom tier running teams, and then the other ones are kind of middle of the pack. So I would take Zach Moss on this one. That one's I don't think Zach or John Taylor comes back this season. I think this season's kind of a wash for him as well. And let's get everybody healthy for next season. So give me Zach Moss. I would take Zach Moss on this. And then
Agreed.
the other question that we had came from a gentleman by the name of Billy Benson 5. He said, would you trade Kyron Williams for Brandon Ayuk in an 8-team league? First and foremost, Bill Benson 5. I get it. Like 8. Sometimes you only have 8 friends that want to play football, but try and find 2 more people and at least get that to a 10-man league so it gets a little bit more competitive. But regardless, he says my wide receiver 2 is a problem. He says he's got Garrett Wilson, Adam Thielen, and Rashee Rice as his wide receiver 2, which is why he's interested in Brandon Ayuk. His other running backs are Breece Hall, Devon Achane, and CMC. I would look for a higher wide receiver than Brandon Ayuk, my friend. And that's not to say I don't like Brandon Ayuk, but I think Kyron Williams is far more valuable.
Well, and I'm also nervous about his running back situation because Breece Hall, obviously we know his talent, but like that offense is just bad and they don't ever get in scoring position. And then A-Chain's dealing with all these injuries. Like if he's on the field, then great, but Mostert's also doing really well. So CMC's great, but you might not have a running back too if the cards don't fall your way.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do it. I mean, like I said, I like Brandon Ayuk as an own, and I think he's pretty fun, but I think the consistency variance. I mean, he's wide receiver 13 on the season, but Kyron Williams is just getting it done. I would look to move Breece or A-Chain for another wide receiver instead. So I probably wouldn't do this. I'm going to say no. And to conclude, waiver wire targets. Scotty, I think you brought a couple to the table, and so have I, so I will let you kick this thing off.
Yeah, I mean, I just brought a couple obvious ones from the injuries from this last week. Tajay Spears is my first one. If Derrick Henry does have a concussion, I know that's a mystery right now, but if he does have a concussion and he does miss time, obviously Tajay Spears is going to be a great addition for you. And then along similar lines, Antonio Gibson. Brian Robinson left with a hamstring injury. We know hamstrings, they tend to linger. They do have a bye coming up, so there's a chance Robinson doesn't miss any time. But if you're competing maybe for a playoff spot, Antonio Gibson, if Brian Robinson is out, is going to, at the very minimum, see the majority of the passing down work, which will be good. And then I think he'll see the majority of the carries as well.
Okay, and then I brought big old Ezekiel Elliott, starting center for the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson went out this last week and is expected to miss multiple weeks. I get it. The Patriots are a very lackluster offense, but something has to give here. Zeke saw 17 touches and 5 targets this last week with Ramondre out. That is great volume for a starting running back. You can plug and play him if Ramondre misses any time, and he's only 46% rostered, so go grab him. And the other person is Jordan Love. So you got to love what Jordan is doing right now. Look, over these last 4 weeks, Love is actually the quarterback 3 on the season. He's been looking a lot better, and his rest of season matchups are beautiful. He's got the Giants, Tampa Bay, Carolina, and Minnesota. Even with Christian Watson being questionable and the whole health situation with him at hand, I would still be rostering Jordan Love, and he is only currently 63% rostered. Go check to see if he's available because he is, like I mentioned, he's quarterback 3 through these last 4 games, and he is looking electric, so I would go grab him. Last conversational piece before we get the hell out of here. Monday Night Football. Obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, it is Tuesday and you know the answer. But Bengals Jaguars are playing here in just an hour. Gentlemen, who do you guys have with this one?
Got to be the Jags. This one
I'm here for the storylines. I want the Bengals to win.
I also want the Bengals to win because
I want the Bengals to win.
I want chaos to ensue in that division. And if the Bengals win, it creates chaos. So I'm going to go Bengals just for the sake of pouring gasoline on the fire.
I'll side with you guys as long as there are points scored on both sides because I've got a lot of fantasy implications for those Jags.
Oh, so do I,
Yeah.
but I need the Jags to fail, so that's why I'm also going Bengals.
Shootout, but they lose. There we go.
Yeah. I need
there we go.
Evan McPherson to not kick any field goals, though, so we'll figure it out. But, okay,
All right.
cool. Well, gentlemen, that is all the time that we have today. I appreciate this. This was a long episode, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So my last request to anybody who is still currently listening, go hit the subscribe button, man. Truth be told, it does mean the world. We are on all social media platforms, and we're posting all sorts of different content on all of them. So if you're on TikTok, we're posting clips over there. If you're on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you are at, we are also at. So make sure to follow us, hit subscribe, and then give us 5 stars on whatever platform. It does mean the world. So that's it, gentlemen. You got anything else?
That's it.
Perfect. We
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.